I only have 1 month left to live. Will you travel with me? The millionaire asked the waitress. He barely spoke that morning. If he had stayed silent, Teresa would never have discovered the fear hidden behind the tired eyes of the man who ordered coffee every single day. Teresa Lopez quickly wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at the wall clock inside the corner bistro, nestled in the bustling West Village, New York. It was 7:12 a.m., and the morning rush was still building. Only a few regulars occupied the worn wooden tables. Among them, the man who always sat in the right corner, near the window overlooking Bleecker Street. Ethan Hayes arrived at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp every day, just as he had for the last 3 months. A double Americano, black, no sugar, and never more than a simple good morning, or thank you. Teresa guessed he was in his late 30s, but something in his face made him look older, as if he carried an invisible crushing weight on his shoulders. That crisp October morning, when Teresa approached his table with his coffee, Ethan wasn't looking out the window as usual. His eyes were fixed on his own hands, which were trembling slightly. "Your coffee, Mr. Hayes," Teresa said, placing the mug down. Ethan looked up, and Teresa noticed a profound difference. It wasn't exhaustion, it was pure fear. "Teresa," he said, and she was surprised he knew her name. "Can I ask you something odd?" Teresa hesitated. In 3 months, these were the first words he had spoken beyond the basic greetings. "Sure," she replied, adjusting her apron. Ethan took a deep breath, and his words came out as an urgent whisper. "If you knew you only had 1 month left to live, what would you do?" Teresa felt a knot in her stomach. The question was too heavy for a Tuesday morning in a coffee shop. "I don't know why you're asking." Ethan looked back down at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was firmer, yet heavy with deep sadness. "Because yesterday I found out I have a brain tumor. The doctors gave me 4 weeks, maybe 5. Teresa's legs weakened, and she leaned on the empty chair next to his table. "My God," she murmured. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," Ethan said, finally taking a sip of his coffee. "In fact, I need to ask you for something. Something that's going to sound completely insane." Teresa sat down, completely forgetting about the other customers. Something in Ethan's voice made her unable to move. "I have money, Teresa. A lot of money. I inherited an investment firm from my father 5 years ago, but I never cared for it. I left everything to the managers and lived an empty life." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "I want to travel. I want to see places I've never seen, eat food I've never tasted, talk to people I've never met. I want to feel like I actually lived, even if it's just for a month." Teresa didn't understand where the conversation was going. "That's wonderful, Mr. Hayes. I'm sure it will be an incredible trip." Ethan looked directly into her eyes. "I want you to come with me." The silence between them stretched into an eternity. Teresa could hear the low hum of the espresso machine and the distant murmur of other patrons, but everything felt far away. "I don't understand," she finally said. "These 3 months of watching you work here made me realize something. You treat every customer like they are special. You smile even when you're tired. You possess something I never did, the ability to find joy in the small things." Teresa felt her heart race. "Mr. Hayes, I barely know you, and you don't know me." "That's exactly why," Ethan interrupted. "I don't want to spend my last month with people who know me and will pity me. I want to see the world through the eyes of someone who can still be surprised." He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table. "This is my assistant's card. If you accept, she will arrange everything. Flights, hotels, documentation. You won't pay a dime, and you'll receive enough money to never have to work another day when you get back." Teresa looked at the card, then at Ethan. "And if I say no, then I go alone and you continue with your normal life. No problem, no hard feelings." Teresa picked up the card, feeling the weight of the decision. "I need to think about it." Ethan nodded, stood up, and left money on the table for the covey. "You have until tomorrow morning. I'll be here at the same time." He was at the door when he turned one last time. "Teresa, I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes life gives us only one chance to do something completely different." He left, leaving Teresa alone with the card in her hand and a decision that would change everything. That night, Teresa couldn't sleep. She sat on the small fire escape of her apartment in the East Village. looking out at the city lights and thinking about Ethan's offer. She had never been outside the U.S. Born and raised in New York, she had worked in diners and bistros since she was 18, and her biggest adventure had been a trip to Miami Beach with her friends 2 years ago. "Mom, what would you do?" she whispered to the photo of her mother on the coffee table. Carmen Lopez had passed away when Teresa was 25, leaving behind memories of a brave woman who always said, "Life is too short not to take risks, mija." The next morning, Teresa arrived at the corner bistro 30 minutes early. She needed to talk to her boss, Mr. Henderson, about taking a month's leave. "A month's leave, Teresa? You haven't taken a full week of vacation in 5 years," said Mr. Henderson, a man who had owned the cafe for over 20 years. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Mr. Henderson. A customer invited me to travel." Mr. Henderson looked at her with experienced eyes. "That customer is the man who always sits in the corner table." Teresa nodded, surprised by his observation. "He seems like a good man, sad but respectful. And you, Teresa, you've worked here 5 years without asking for a thing. If this trip will do you good, go." At 7 a.m. sharp, Ethan walked into the bistro. He looked paler than the day before, but his eyes immediately found Teresa. She walked over to his table and, without a word, put the card back on the table. "I accept," she said simply. Ethan's face lit up with a smile Teresa had never seen before. "You really accept?" "I really do, but with a few conditions." Ethan gestured for her to continue. "First, I want to know your story. If we're going to travel together for a month, I don't want us to be two strangers." "Agreed," Ethan said. "Second, I pay for my own meals. You can pay for the hotels and flights, but I don't want to feel like you're supporting me." Ethan hesitated. "Teresa, I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes." "That's my condition," she insisted. "All right. And the third, when you feel sick, when the illness starts to get the better of you, we come home. I don't want you spending your last days far from everything you know just to keep a promise to me." Ethan extended his hand. "It's a deal." Teresa shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip despite the subtle tremor. "When do we leave?" "The day after tomorrow. First Paris, then Barcelona, Rome, and we finish with Santorini. I always wanted to see the Greek Sea." Teresa felt a mix of nerves and excitement. "I've never been on a plane." Ethan smiled again. "Then it will be a first for both of us. I've never traveled with company." They spent the entire morning talking. Ethan told her about the global import-export company he inherited, about how he had spent the last 5 years merely existing, not truly living. Teresa talked about her dreams of seeing the world and how she'd always imagined what it would be like to step on distant shores. "Why didn't you ever travel before?" Ethan asked. "Money, mainly, and fear too. I always thought traveling alone would be dangerous, and I never had anyone who wanted to go with me." "You do now," Ethan said softly. That afternoon, Teresa said goodbye to the bistro, her coworkers, and her regulars. Some were surprised, others were happy for her opportunity. "Take care, sweetie," said Mrs. Johnson, a woman who had tea there every afternoon, "and live every moment." Ethan was waiting for her outside. "Do you want to have dinner with me? I think we should get to know each other better before the trip." Teresa accepted, and they walked to a small Italian spot. During dinner, Ethan revealed more about his solitary life, how he never had serious relationships because he was always focused on responsibilities that didn't interest him. "And you?" he asked. "Married? Boyfriend?" "I had a few relationships, but nothing serious. The last guy I dated said I was too simple for him." Teresa laughed, but Ethan noticed a touch of pain in her voice. "Being simple is the most beautiful thing there is," Ethan said. "Complicated is overrated." When they said goodbye at Teresa's apartment door, she realized that for the first time in years, she felt genuinely excited about the future. "Ethan," she said before he could leave, "thank you for giving me this chance." "Thank you for agreeing to be part of my final chapter," he replied. And Teresa knew in that moment that this journey would change them both forever. JFK International Airport was packed that Thursday morning. Teresa held her small suitcase, the same one she used for her Miami Beach trip, trying to control her nerves. Ethan arrived promptly at 9 a.m. He was dressed casually, but Teresa noticed the quality of the fabric and the accessories. It was easy to forget he was a millionaire when they were just talking over coffee. "Ready for the adventure?" he asked, smiling despite his obvious paleness. "Ready," Teresa lied, feeling butterflies in her stomach. During the flight to Paris, Ethan explained the itinerary his assistant had prepared. 3 days in Paris, then Barcelona for 2 days, 4 days in Rome, and we finish with 5 days in Santorini. "And after that?" Teresa asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "After that, we go home, and I prepare for what's next." Teresa took his hand. "Don't think about that now. Think about Paris." The flight was smooth, except for a few moments of turbulence that made Teresa cling to Ethan's arm. He laughed at her reaction, and she realized how long it had been since she'd seen anyone laugh so sincerely. Paris welcomed them with a typical gray October sky, but none of that mattered when Teresa saw the Eiffel Tower for the first time. She stopped in the middle of the Pont de Bir Hakim and just stared. "It's exactly like the photos, but completely different at the same time," she murmured. Ethan was watching Teresa more than the tower. "How so?" "In photos, it's just a beautiful structure. In person, it has a soul." They stayed in a boutique hotel in the 7th arrondissement, separate rooms, as Ethan had made clear from the start. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable at any point," he had said. The first day they walked along the banks of the Seine, Teresa tried crepes for the first time while Ethan recounted how his father always talked about Paris, but never got to visit. "He used to say Paris was where people went to fall in love," Ethan said. "Not with other people, but with life." "And are you falling in love with life?" Teresa asked. Ethan stopped walking and looked at her. "For the first time in years, yes." The second day they visited the Louvre. Teresa stood in front of the Mona Lisa for over an hour trying to understand what made it special. "I don't get the hype," she admitted. "Maybe that's the special thing about it," Ethan said. "Sometimes the special part is that we can't explain why something moves us." That afternoon, while having coffee at a bistro near Notre Dame, Ethan had his first crisis. It started with an intense headache, then dizziness. Teresa helped him sit down and asked the waiter for a glass of water. "Do you want to go back to the hotel?" she asked, worried. "No," Ethan replied when the pain subsided. "I'm fine. Just the symptoms the doctor mentioned." "Are you sure?" "Completely. And Teresa, thank you for not panicking." "Why would I panic?" "Because most people get scared when they face someone else's mortality. It reminds them of their own." Teresa thought about that as they walked back. "You know, Ethan, we're all going to die someday. The difference is that you know when. In a way, that's an advantage." "How so?" "You get to choose how you want to live your last days. Most people just let life happen without ever thinking about the end." The third day in Paris, they went up the Eiffel Tower at sunset. The city stretched beneath them like a sea of golden lights. "Teresa," Ethan said as they looked at the view, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When I found out about the tumor, my first thought wasn't about dying. It was about the fact that I had never truly lived." Teresa looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "I'm 33, and I've never been in love. I never woke up excited to start a day. I never laughed until my stomach hurt. Until I met you." "Ethan, I'm not saying I fell in love with you," he quickly clarified. "I'm saying you taught me that it's possible to fall in love with life. That's why these 3 days in Paris have been the best of my existence." Teresa felt tears well up in her eyes. "For me too," she said softly. That night, they ate dinner at a small restaurant in Montmartre. The conversation flowed naturally, as if they were old friends. "Tomorrow, Barcelona," Ethan said, raising his glass of red wine. "Tomorrow, Barcelona," Teresa repeated. "Tell me what city and country you're watching this video from. I'll read every comment." When they returned to the hotel, Ethan stopped at Teresa's door. "Thank you for these days," he said. "The trip has just started," Teresa replied. "I know, but just in case I don't get a chance to say it later, thank you for making me feel alive." And Teresa realized that somehow he was doing the very same thing for her. Barcelona welcomed them with sun and the vibrant energy only Mediterranean cities possess. Teresa woke up at the hotel to the sound of the sea in the distance, and for the first time in years, she felt completely present in the moment. Ethan knocked on her door at 8:15 a.m., carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you'd missed the morning ritual," he said, handing her a cup. Teresa took a sip and made a face. Definitely not the corner bistro coffee, she laughed. Nothing substitutes home, Ethan agreed. But sometimes it's good to try new things. They spent the morning walking down Los Ramblas. Teresa was enchanted by the street performers, especially a young man who painted portraits with his feet. Ethan watched Teresa more than the attractions, noticing how she found magic in the small things. "You have a gift," he said as they paused to watch a flamenco show. "What gift?" "The gift of seeing beauties where others only see routine." Teresa became thoughtful. "My mom used to say, life is like a kaleidoscope. The same light, the same pieces of glass. But every time you turn it, you see a different pattern. It all depends on how you look at it." "Your mom was a wise woman." "She was. She died out of cancer 4 years ago." Ethan stopped walking. "Teresa, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "It's okay. She fought bravely, but in the end, sometimes bravery isn't enough." They walked in silence for a few minutes. "Is that why you agreed to travel with me?" Ethan asked. "Because you know what it's like to lose someone?" "No," Teresa replied honestly. "I accepted because I saw something in your eyes that first day. Fear, yes, but also hope, as if you still believed good things were waiting for you." Otam. That afternoon they visited the Sagrada Familia. Ethan was impressed by the architecture, but Teresa remained silent before the work's sheer scale. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Gaudi never saw his work finish," Teresa said. "He worked on it, knowing he wouldn't live to see the final result, but he still went on, day after day." "And what does that tell you?" "That maybe the important thing isn't seeing the end, but knowing you contributed something beautiful." Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a new distinct understanding. "Have you always been so profound?" Teresa laughed. "My mom used to say I thought too much for a waitress, but I think every job has its dignity, and every person has their depths." That night they dined at a seaside restaurant. Ethan noticed his tremors were more frequent, but decided not to say anything. He didn't want to ruin Teresa's evening. "Can I ask you a personal question?" Teresa asked during dessert. "Of course." "Why did you never get married? I mean, you're handsome, smart, successful." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Because I never found anyone who made me want to be a better person." "And now?" Ethan looked directly into her eyes. "Now it's too late." "No, Ethan. No, Teresa, it's not self-pity, it's reality. I have less than 3 weeks left. It's not fair to start something knowing I'm going to leave the other person heartbroken." Teresa was quiet for a long time. "And what if that person would prefer 3 weeks of happiness to a lifetime of wondering, what if? It would be selfish of me to accept it, or Brahma of her to offer it." They looked at each other for a moment that felt eternal. "Teresa, you are an incredible woman. You deserve someone who can give you a whole lifetime, not just a few weeks." "And what if I told you a few weeks can be worth more than a whole lifetime?" Ethan felt his eyes fill with tears. "Then I'd say you are even more special than I imagined." They walked back to the hotel in silence, each lost in thought. At her door, Teresa turned to him. "You know, Ethan, my mom taught me something else. She said love isn't measured in time. It's measured in intensity. It's better to love deeply for a short time than to never truly love at all." Ethan took her face between his hands. "Teresa, you don't have to say anything now," she whispered. "Just think about what I said." They parted that night knowing something had changed between them, though neither had the courage to name it. Rome welcomed them with its thousand-year-old grandeur and the cozy chaos of its Italian streets. Teresa woke up that morning with a strange feeling, as if she were about to discover something important. Ethan arrived for breakfast paler than usual, but his eyes sparkled with a new determination. "How did you sleep?" Teresa asked. "I thought all night about what you said yesterday," he replied, cutting straight to the point. "And I reached a conclusion." Teresa felt her heart race. "What conclusion?" "That you're right, a few weeks can be worth more than a lifetime. But first I need to tell you something." Teresa noticed the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I lied to you about one thing." Teresa felt a knot in her stomach. "About what?" "About not having fallen in love with you." The ensuing silence was only broken by the noise of the waking Roman city outside. "Ethan, let me finish," he requested. I fell in love with you the second day I saw you at the bistro because of how you treated every customer as if they were special, because of how you smiled even when you were tired. And I fell even more in love during this trip, seeing the world through your eyes. Teresa felt the tears forming. Why did you lie? Because I'm scared, Ethan admitted. Scared to love you and leave you. Scared to ask you to love someone who is going to die. Teresa stood up and walked toward him. And what if I told you it's already too late? That I already love you? Ethan looked at her in surprise. You love me? I think I started loving you when you asked me that strange question at the cafe. Not out of pity or compassion, but because I saw a man brave enough to question what truly matters in life. Ethan stood up and embraced her. Teresa, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. And I love you, she whispered, not despite the time we have left, but because of it. They kissed right there in the hotel restaurant, oblivious to the curious glances of other guests. The first day in Rome was different from all the others. They walked hand in hand through the ancient streets, visited the Colosseum, and tossed coins into the Trevi fountain. But more important than the landmarks were the moments, the shared jokes, the comfortable silences, the glances that said more than 1,000 words. Did you make a wish in the fountain? Ethan asked, watching the water dance. Of course, Teresa said. I wish to cherish every second of the time we have. And did you make a wish? Ethan smiled. I wish to be brave enough to live these days to the fullest, without fear of the end. That afternoon, while visiting the Sistine Chapel, Ethan had another crisis, this one stronger than the last. Teresa helped him sit on a bench, ignoring the murmurs of other tourists. Do you want to go back to the hotel? She asked. In a few minutes, Ethan said, breathing with difficulty. I just need to rest a bit. When the crisis passed, they walked slowly back. It's getting worse, Teresa said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, he admitted, faster than the doctors expected. Teresa stopped walking. What does that mean? It means we might not have the 3 weeks I thought. Teresa felt the world spin for a moment. How much time do we have? Maybe 2 weeks, maybe less. Teresa took a deep breath, fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. Then we have to cherish every moment, she finally said. Teresa, you can go home if you want. I would understand perfectly. Ethan Hayes, she said, stopping and taking his face in her hands. I love you. That means I stay, no matter what. That night they dined at a small restaurant in Trastevere. The food was delicious, the wine smooth, but both were lost in thought. Teresa, Ethan said after a long silence, thank you. For what? For teaching me what it is to love, for showing me that it's possible to be happy, even knowing that everything will end. Thank you, Teresa replied, for showing me that it's worth risking my heart. They walked back to the hotel in silence, knowing that this night would be different. At Teresa's door, Ethan hesitated. Teresa, I know, she said softly. Come in. And for the first time in his life, Ethan understood what it meant to love someone completely, without reservation, even knowing that time was limited. Santorini appeared before them like a dream made of white and blue, the whitewashed houses clinging to the cliffs, the Aegean Sea stretching out to infinity, the sky changing color with every hour of the day. It was exactly as Ethan had imagined, but infinitely more beautiful because he saw it next to Teresa. They arrived on the island on a Sunday morning, and Ethan struggled to hide how weak he was. The flight from Rome had been difficult, with constant dizziness and a persistent headache. Are you okay? Teresa asked as they settled into the hotel in Oya with a direct view of the world's most famous sunset. I'm where I always wanted to be, with who I always wanted to be with. I'm perfect, Ethan replied, smiling despite his obvious paleness. Teresa knew he was lying, but she chose to accept his answer. They had decided in Rome not to waste time talking about the illness more than necessary. The first 2 days were magical. They walked the narrow streets of Oia, sampled local wines on terraces overlooking the sea, and swam in volcanic sand beaches. Teresa was fascinated by every detail, and Ethan was fascinated by watching Teresa be fascinated. Do you know what impresses me most about this place? Teresa asked as they watched the sunset on the third day. What? How everything seems eternal and fragile at the same time. These cliffs have been here for thousands of years, but they could collapse at any moment. Ethan looked at her with admiration. How do you always find poetry in things? I think I learned it from you, Teresa said. You taught me that beauty lies precisely in what doesn't last. On the fourth day, Ethan woke up unable to get out of bed. Teresa tried to hide her panic, but she knew the moment they both dreaded had arrived. Maybe we should go home, she suggested softly. Not yet, Ethan said with effort. I haven't seen the Santorini sunset with you for the last time yet. Teresa helped him dress and ordered a cab to take them to the highest point in Oya. Ethan leaned on her with every step, but insisted on walking. Promise me one thing, he said as they slowly climbed the hill. Anything. When I'm gone, don't stop traveling. Don't stop seeing the world with those eyes that made me fall in love with life. Teresa swallowed her tears. Ethan, don't do this. Teresa, I need to say it. Listen. They stopped to rest on a stone bench. I want you to take all the money I left for you and use it to live, travel, meet people, fall in love again. I'll never fall in love again, Teresa interrupted. Of course you will. And when it happens, I want you to remember that love is not possession, it's freedom. And I free you to love as many times as your heart desires. Teresa could no longer hold back the tears. How are you so brave? Because you taught me that bravery isn't being fearless, it's acting despite the fear. They reached the highest point just as the sun began to dip, turning the sky gold over the sea. Ethan sat on a low wall, pulling Teresa to his side. It's exactly as I imagined, he murmured. The sky was painted in orange, orange, pink, and purple. The sea reflected the colors like a liquid mirror, and the ancient windmills were silhouettes against the light. Ethan, Teresa said softly. Yes? Thank you for choosing me for this journey. Thank you for accepting. They remained silent, watching the sun touch the horizon. Teresa, Ethan said, his voice faint. I'm here. I love you more than words can say. And I love you forever. The sun disappeared completely, leaving the sky full of stars. Ethan rested his head on Teresa's shoulder. It was perfect, he whispered. Yeah, Teresa nodded, kissing his forehead. Ethan closed his eyes, smiling. Promise me you'll remember me when you see other sunsets. I promise. And you promise you'll be there somehow? I promise, well. And there, beneath the starry sky of Santorini, with the sound of the waves in the distance and the scent of jasmine in the air, Ethan Hayes passed away peacefully, knowing he had lived more in 1 month than in all the years prior. Teresa stayed there for hours, holding him until the local authorities arrived. She didn't cry in that moment. She just smiled, remembering all the shared laughter, all the sunsets viewed together, all the love lived in such a short time. 3 days later, Teresa was on the flight back to New York. She carried not only her clothes and her luggage, but memories that would last forever, and an envelope that Ethan had left with instructions to open only on the return flight. Inside the envelope, she found a letter and a bank card. My dearest Teresa, if you are reading this, it means our journey has ended. I hope these days were as special for you as they were for me. The bank card gives you access to an account with millions of dollars. This is not to obligate you to anything, but to give you the freedom to pursue your dreams. Use this money to travel, to study, to help others, for whatever makes your heart happy. You gave me the greatest gift anyone can give another person. You showed me how to truly live. Now it's your turn to live for yourself, for me, and for all the sunsets we will still share in some way. With all my eternal love, Ethan P.S. Open a cafe somewhere special, and when someone sad sits alone at a corner table, offer them more than just coffee. Offer them a chance. Teresa cried for the first time since Ethan's death, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. He had given her more than money or travel. He had given her the certainty that it is possible to love intensely, even knowing that everything ends someday. 6 months later, Teresa opened Horizon Cafe in a small coastal town in Santa Cruz, California. The spot had an incredible view of the Pacific, and every afternoon customers could watch the sunset while sipping coffee. Teresa always kept a table reserved in the corner, near the window, and when someone sat there with a lost, sad look, She would approach with a smile and ask, "Can I offer you something more than just coffee?" Sometimes it was just a conversation. Other times it was an opportunity. Once, it was a plane ticket for someone who had never left their small town. Every evening before closing the cafe, Teresa would look at the sunset and whisper, "Thank you, Ethan, for teaching me that loving is always worth it." And somehow she knew he was listening. Sometimes starting over isn't about going back to the beginning. It's just choosing a new path with a heart full of love and memories that helped us grow. If you like this story, comment below, share it with your friends, and make sure to subscribe to Rich Hearts Revealed for more stories about love, risk, and living life to the fullest.